Good evening, everyone. It's Dr. McCoy, and it's time for our weekly gathering. If this is your first time, welcome. We gather every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There's also a conference call line if you would ever like to join that way anonymously as well. I want to thank you all for your prayers and for your support of my ministry. I just really want you to know that those prayers are really helping me and they're working. So thank you. So as I mentioned before, we are in a 4-week really series focusing on racialized trauma. So this is week 2 and I have my book here ready. I told you all about this book the last time. So this is again our second week where I'm going to be focusing on this book, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies by Mr. Resma Menakem, okay? Mr. Resma Menakem, who is a therapist and who is a healer. And I think that many of us know that we need to be healed from racialized trauma in America. So I shared a lot with you on the last time, and I'll repeat some of those things if you are just joining this second week. But I won't repeat everything because there's some new ideas from Mr. Resma Menakem that I want us to entertain on this evening. But there were some things that I talked about last week, and one of the things was white body supremacy. So I'm going to review that just a little bit. But there is a quote by Toni Morrison, the late Miss Toni Morrison. She was a novelist. Many of us know that. She was an editor, and she was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. This is what she said. No one ever talks about the moment you found out you were white or the moment you found out you were black. That's a profound revelation. The minute you find that out, something happens. You have to renegotiate everything. So that's what Miss Toni Morrison said. If you think about it, there was a time when America taught you that you were a particular race. Now, you were born a human, so you were born into what God calls the human race. But in America, you were taught that there was a social construct called race. And once that happened, you had to renegotiate, really, as Miss Toni Morrison said, you have to renegotiate everything. I told one group last week, I believe that God will look on us the same way God looked on Adam and Eve. The same way he said to them, who told you you were naked? I believe that God is going to look on America and say, who told you you were white? Who told you you were black? I didn't. I didn't do that. So renegotiating everything. So there needs to be a healing from racialized trauma because of the creation of whiteness in the first place. Because of this idea that race is something indeed that divides us. So Mr. Menakem, he is a therapist, and he says that healing involves discomfort, but so does refusing to heal. So this evening, I told you that much of his work, he talks about how trauma is not just something cognitive, as we've been taught over the years. It can be about talk, therapy, and it can be about reflection, and it can be about some things that happen mentally, but more so his thoughts is that, it's not just about what happens in our heads, it's about what happens in our bodies. So I told you that for the 4 weeks that we're looking at this, there's going to be some body work, and I wanted you to consider me just as someone who is a physical therapist in a hospital, or someone who is, I think last week I said, a personal trainer at a gym. Consider me to be your body trainer in the way of healing, okay? Because as you know, I've said it before, my ministry is about impacting lives, healing hearts and growing faith. So this is the healing hearts part. So I want to talk to you from this book on this evening about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I was able to pull. It's really challenging to pull from this book because it's just so great. And so I just encourage you, if you don't have a copy of this book, get it, because I'm trying to explain some things here from my grandmother's hands, but you really need the book. And you need the book because there are activities there. And if you would complete some of these activities, it will help you on really understanding your body. Because, for example, he says that as a therapist, when he begins working with new clients, one of the first things he does before he starts talking, about issues, or the folks there start talking about family histories or emotions, he helps them to ground themselves. Because again, this is body work. He helps them to ground themselves. And we're going to do an activity from this book so that you can have an example, if you don't already, of what that looks like. Just an example of orienting yourself to the here and now. That's what he does first. Before we start doing all of this talking, let's consider your body. He works with people slowly, he says, so that they can feel their way back into their bodies. If you think about it, we're not always aware of our bodies. We're aware of our bodies when we get sick, right? Because the body sends that message of perhaps physical pain, something's going on, and we don't have a choice but to kind of slow down and listen to our bodies. Uh-oh, that's a cough. Uh-oh, that's a fever. Uh-oh, that's fatigue. So we tend to listen to our bodies by way of sickness, but it doesn't have to get there. It doesn't have to get that far. Sickness is a thing that happens. You get the flu, you get a cold, whatever, COVID. But what about healing your body due to the traumas that you have experienced? So you may not think you feel a physical pain because you don't have a cold or you don't have the flu. But what he does is he helps people to work slowly to feel their way back into their bodies and then remember and reclaim their bodies. See that? Because the body is so important. So your body keeps the score. So what he does is he provides a set of activities. And like I said, I'm going to go over some of this with us, and welcome on the conference call line as well. I'm sorry I did not greet you. And so a set of activities that will help us to learn to ground ourselves and to feel our bodies. Because a lot of times we are, and I know you've heard this before, we're human doings, or yes, more than human beings. So let's see what it's like to just be. So we have to notice when our body is open, and we have to notice when our body is constricted and what causes it to open and what causes it to constrict and what causes it to activate and what causes it to settle. So he provides these body practices, okay? And I really want to go over one with you. The reason why is because if you get this book, one of the things that he suggests on page 30 is that we don't skim the reader. You don't skim or skip the healing and grounding exercises in the book. So I don't want to go further in giving you more information without respecting your body enough. And really, this great man, Mr. Resman Menakem's work, without respecting the body, right, and respecting his work. I don't want to move forward to information when these activities can help you to remember your body or perform a particular action. So he's saying when you reach the step of the body practices, and I was going to show you what the book looks like, but when you reach the step and it looks like this on the inside, these are the body practices. And you see, I have me some new bookmarks so they won't fall out. Look at that. Yeah. So these stick, they stay. And so I want to make sure that I'm presenting this in a comprehensive way. For those who don't have the book, or maybe you'll never get the book, but you're going to be with me for 4 weeks. So I need to respectfully give you this information. So he says that when you reach each one of these body practices, take a few slow breaths. He says, then as you read the particular section, practice the activity in your body. So as I'm giving you this information, I'm going to stop again and respect what's happening in your body. And so he says, if you're not in a situation where it's possible to complete the action or complete the body practice, he says, you know what? Just put the book down temporarily. He says, and then pick it up again when you have the opportunity to practice the body activity. Because again, his argument is that trauma happens in our bodies. Okay? It's not just something you think about. It's something that is experienced throughout your being. So he provides these body activities throughout the book. Okay? So you're going to notice in the next couple weeks that some of these activities, it's going to be simply stopping and noticing. Now, these are things that I'm practicing even, for example, in my preaching. I had a professor in seminary, Dr. Gardner C. Taylor, who is gone now, but he was the best professor that I ever had. And one of the things that he said to us was, even when you're preaching, don't be afraid of silence. Don't be afraid of stopping. And so I'm working on that because, again, I'm respecting my body and what's going on even in the preaching moment. And then I need to respect the body of the hearers. So if I raise a question and I say, think about it in the sermon, and then I complete that sentence, and then I just keep going, did I really give you time to think about it? So part of respecting your body is to let you maybe sit with that for a moment. That's one of the reasons why those of us who are professors in seminaries try to let, folks know when they're preparing messages and all those things, you can't tell it all. And part of not telling it all is respecting the bodies that you're actually ministering to. Okay. So he says, if you're not able to do it, put it down. And these activities may be about stopping. It may be about noticing. Most of them involve doing something more, like sensing and imagining. Remember when you were a child and you had a vivid imagination? Now, if we imagine things, sometimes we think it's of the devil. You can't even have an imagination now. I'll give you an example. One of the body practices in this book, he talks about sitting and kind of thinking about an ancestor coming to you. And if you read it at first, I have to admit, at first it's just like, okay, is this like a seance? Mr. Resma Minikim, is this like a seance? He's like, welcome an ancestor, but it's an imagining type thing that we did as children. I know I had an imaginary friend when I was a little child called Francine. My mom said I used to talk to Francine all the time. Well, I know there's a thin line when we consider mental health, doing something like that and then needing some other type of, help, therapy and things like that. But all he's trying to do is to get readers to be in tune with their bodies, and we don't always stop to do that. So being in tune with your body may be stopping to reflect. It may mean sensing. It may mean imagining. It may mean moving or activating your body in some other way. So I'm not going to go over all of them with you. You need to get the book for yourself. But just know, if you get the book, you have to be patient with this because perhaps you've just not done it before. So it may seem weird, okay? So let's do one of these practices now. And then I'm going to give you more information about white body supremacy and historical trauma and all those kinds of things. Those things are really heavy, experiencing trauma, persistent trauma. But before we do that, listen to what he says. And if you want to try this, you can, but I'm just going to read it, hopefully in a sensible way that will encourage you. Sit quietly and comfortably for a minute or two, breathing normally. Notice your breath as it enters your nose, your windpipe, your lungs. You're doing this for a minute or two. You can almost hear your breath, right? Then bring your attention to the bottom of your feet. Sense the ground beneath your feet supporting you. Stay focused here for a few breaths. Now move your attention to your back, to the sensation of it pressing lightly against the chair if you're sitting in a chair. Feel the chair supporting you. Doing what it's designed to do. Now, think of a person or a pet or a place that makes you feel safe. a place that makes you feel safe and secure. Imagine you're with that person. Imagine you're with that pet or in that safe place. And let yourself experience that safety and security for a few seconds. Now, check in with your body, because this is body work. And if this is challenging for you, that's why you need to do it. Your body matters. So check in with your body. Start with your shoulders. How do your shoulders feel? Do they feel relaxed or constricted? A lot of times if you go get a massage, they can tell you that you have tension even in your shoulders. Some of us walk, like this, if you can see me. And on the conference call line, I'm just kind of tensing my shoulders, We're really tense. So are your shoulders relaxed or constricted, closed or open? What about your neck? What about your jaw? What about your major joints, your ankles, knees, hips, wrists, elbows, and shoulders, your back, your toes? So stay with that experience for a couple of breaths. Notice if anything arises or changes, such as vibration or sensation. If an image changes, emotions, and impulse. Notice all those things. Okay, then he says, and I know this is not easy work. Now he says, imagine the comforting person or pet or place gone. Instead, there's an angry stranger standing in front of you. The stranger's arms are crossed and he or she is glaring at you silently. You look into the stranger's eyes, hoping that his or her expression will soften, but it remains unchanged. So now check in with your body. So if you're looking at me right now, consider how I'm looking at you. I'm trying to look at you as he mentions, in a way that is angry. So if I'm looking at you angry and I have my arms crossed, now what's happening to your body? Because now that comfortable person, pet, or place is gone, and now there's me looking at you in an angry way. So you look into my eyes and you're hoping that my expression will soften, but it remains the same. So check in with your body again. How do your shoulders feel now? So we're talking about racialized trauma. So now what's happening? So if you've ever experienced something that was uncomfortably, the tones of it was racist in nature. We're checking in with body now, okay? Even if you are a white person, there was a time when people, well, I say it was a time, but there are still times when, because you like, black people, they call you an N lover, So imagine that person. Again, we're talking about racially charged things, experiencing them in our bodies. So even as a white person, think about that. Okay, so this is about race, not just about one particular race, but what happens in our bodies because of white supremacy in America. So now, how do your shoulders feel? Your neck, your jaw, your back, your toes. Gently, one by one, feel into the places in your body where you sense constriction. Let your attention rest there briefly in each one. Now send the angry stranger away. Okay, so gone. And bring back the comforting person, place, or pet. Now breathe and relax in safety that this presence now provides. And now you can move your attention through your body from your head to your toes one more time and feel into each spot where you sense softness and stay with that softness. So now we're back in softness. But see what happens when we consider our bodies and even images. The pet is comforting. The place is comforting. The person is comforting. But then anger comes into your space and something can happen to your body. So as we continue to do this body work, this is what he wants us to consider as we face challenging information. So now I'm about to give you some challenging information. So consider what's going on in your body as you get this information. So last week I talked about what white body supremacy is from the perspective of Resva Menakem. He said we should really call it, rather than white supremacy, we really could coin it white body supremacy, because every white skinned body automatically benefits from that white skinned body in America. So it doesn't matter who inhabits that body. It doesn't matter what they think, what they believe, what they do, or what they say. Simply by virtue of the fact that they are in a white body in America, they automatically benefit because of that white body. So whether or not white body supremacy is formally and explicitly taught to us, it's in the air we breathe, the culture we share, and the bodies we inhabit. That's why when we are faced with white supremacy or white body supremacy, we have to consider what's going on in our bodies. Because of white body supremacy, when we think about white bodies and we think about black bodies, and even in this book, he talks about police bodies. When we consider white body supremacy, there's an effect that it has on particular bodies. So he focuses on white bodies, black bodies, and again, police bodies. He says the white body sees itself as fragile and vulnerable, and it looks to police bodies for safety and protection. This is why some people in non-white communities don't automatically reach out to the police. This is why there was a rap group, years ago, that had a derogatory bad word, first word, the police. Maybe if you know hip hop, you might know, but they said the police. What I'm telling you is this is because of white supremacy in America. So the white body is going to reach out to the police. And I see you, Dwight Spencer, saying amen. There you go. There you go. So see why I did the body work first. That's why he wants this body work to happen before some of this comes about. Because what you will do, I will do, is run away. We don't want to face this, and we don't want to talk about it. You see, why? Because the body has, and he talks about this too, this fight or flight reaction to things. So when you see white bodies and non-white bodies responding in ways where we don't want to talk about it, that's a flight response. But give yourselves a hand or a pat on the back wherever you are, because you are not taking flight. So whenever the white body sees black bodies, the white body sees black bodies as dangerous and needing to be controlled, yet also as potential sources of service and comfort. You've seen movies like that, right? The Help was one of the movies. Black bodies were service and comfort for white bodies. That's an example of what white body supremacy does and what we've been taught in America. So then what do black bodies see? So that's white bodies. The black body sees the white body as privileged and controlling and dangerous. This is why black men have told me before that they're very careful. They don't get on the elevator with a white woman. This is an example. So now I'm giving you an example. This is not in the book. I'm talking about lived experiences that people have shared with me. Okay. So I believe in so much of this book because I've listened to you. I've listened to them and they and everybody. And I have experienced America in a black body. So he says the black body sees that white body many times as dangerous. And then, we think about lynching, not just being in the elevator with the white woman, but lynchings and things like that. The violence of that white bodies inflict on black bodies. It is conflicted about the police body. The black body is conflicted about the police body. And I gave an example of that, which it sees as sometimes a source of protection, sometimes a source of danger, and sometimes both at once. So if a black body is going through like one of those speed checks, may see the police body as a source of protection at that moment, because they simply want to make sure that people aren't like just out there speeding and just out of control, right? So in that regard, the black body sees the police body as a source of protection. But at the same time, simultaneously, the police body could be a source of danger, because if that police body has a heightened white supremacy ideology, then immediately, as the white body sees the black body, immediately that black body is dangerous and is in need of control. For a matter of fact, I'm doing a speed check, but where's your license? Okay, got that. Then start asking the black body all these other questions, when really it was just a police check. But it's because the police body sees black bodies as often dangerous and disruptive. What are you doing on this side of town? Why are you over here? Look at your license. Why am I telling you this? Because this happened to my brother. We grew up in like a suburb type, we didn't grow up in Winston-Salem. Although I was born in Winston-Salem, we grew up in a place called Pofftown, North Carolina. So my brother told me that he was on a certain side of town, and when the police officer saw his license, he was like, what are you doing over here? Because he's not that type of black person. He doesn't live in the projects. What are you doing on this side of town? Why? Because the police body sees black bodies as often dangerous and disruptive, as well as superhumanly powerful and can take a lot of pain. Well, where does that come from? Well, when we consider the days of slavery in America, there are several books that will remind us, the kind of books that they don't want children to read because they only want us to know a certain type of American history. They don't want us to know all of it. But if you read those other books that are pretty much left out of school, you didn't read it, so that's why you need to go buy it now. You will learn that in the days of slavery, the black man was called an ox, and was considered a workhorse. Superhumanly powerful. So then the police body, when it sees that black body and thinks of the black body, male body, for example, as a threat, got to pull out the taser, got to pull out and then we have situations where the black man says, I can't breathe. And then he never breathes again. So there's a way out of all of this. And that's why I'm doing this. There's a way out. Okay. There's a way out. And it begins with our bodies, because again, our bodies respond in ways that cognitively we didn't even think. The white woman who's clutching her purse in the elevator is cognitively not even necessarily thinking that her body simply responds to a black body. See that? The black man who does not want to reach out to the cops and is like, no. It's not always cognitive. It's just that they believe that the police body sees their body as a particular way. So you know what? Let me just handle this on my own. Let me take care of this. I'm not a renegade. I just know that I'm living in a black body in America. So when it comes to this book and we continue with this, I won't just read this book, but you're going to experience this book with your body. So I hope you'll be patient with that, because the only place where mending can really happen when we think about what's racialized or really any trauma, the only place that mending can happen is in our bodies, not just here. It's got to be in here. Whenever you are performing a racist activity, you need to look at your body and say, where is that coming from? And it can't just be here. It's got to be something in here. Where are you constricted? If you're clutching the purse, it's right there. You're holding on to this. Why? What's going on in your body? So sometimes it's about unhealed trauma. So I taught you about grounding yourself and these set of activities. So we'll do that for the next couple of weeks. But then I wanted to mention something about unhealed trauma, because he talks about this. And what he says is, and some people don't like this kind of talk. That's why I'm doing it. Because if you're not going to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it. Because there are people walking around with unhealed trauma every day and nobody's talking about it. And I liken it unto Tamar's story in the Bible, where she was raped by her brother Amnon. And it's just, if you read it, the last part there says that she lived in her other brother's house like for the rest of her days. And that was just it. So there's unhealed trauma even in the Bible. This woman was raped. What did anybody do about it? And these are the types of problems that we have in our communities, because nobody even wants to talk about it. You have unhealed trauma and nobody will talk to you about it because they're afraid of you. I have unhealed trauma. I won't talk about it because I'm afraid. I'm scared. I may be re-traumatized. Oh, it's not that big a deal. Just move on. Press towards the mark of the high calling in Jesus Christ. Just press your way. God is able. And you feel real good. And you're never healed. Well, my ministry is about healing. And it's a lot of work. And it can hurt before it gets better. But it can get better. So this unhealed trauma, it really acts like a rock that is thrown in a pond, and it causes ripples that move outward. So you need to work, I need to work on my unhealed trauma, because those ripples, it's not just about you. It's about the fact that it spreads from one person to the other. So your unhealed trauma is why your relationships are not working out the way that you thought they would, because you're unhealed. That ripple is about your child, and you wonder why your child is like that. When you pass that thing down, it affects other bodies over time. And after months and after years, unhealed trauma can start to appear like somebody's personality. That's not really who you are. But that unhealed trauma, year after year after year, it starts to appear like your personality. So people say, you have issues. People say, don't date him, don't date her, because that's red flags. And what we do is we start leaving each other alone rather than helping each other to deal with this. And I've tried to help a whole lot of people deal with this. You know, I've even dated a few people who have tried to talk about this, you know, and it's just kind of like, You're not a bad person. It's not a red flag. I know that's what people want to say. There's nothing wrong with you. You just need to do the work to get to where you need to be so that those ripples can no longer be. So if it's longer than a year or 2 years, over even longer period of time, it gets passed down and it compounds through our bodies and even in our households. That's why you had to leave home when you were younger, because that parent had unhealed trauma. Because what happened is it started to become a family norm. And, we say dysfunctional families and things like that. Well, even families don't work through these kinds of things because, again, like I mentioned, there are some people who are just like, oh, I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to deal with that. But listen to me. You need somebody who understands that we all have baggage, and you need somebody who will be patient enough with you, and you be patient enough with them to unpack that baggage. That's what makes a healthy relationship. It's about unpacking. So it becomes a family norm, and we call that dysfunctional families. And we say, well, everybody comes from a dysfunctional family. It's just the way it is. But when are we going to do the work? Because what happens is it can get transmitted, he says, and compounded through multiple families and generations. And then it can start to look like culture. And that's why people start saying things like, oh, all black people are just out of control. It starts looking like culture. They call it black woman anger or angry black woman. And then they'll put the word syndrome on it. See that? Starts to look like culture. See the breakdown? That's not culture. It's not culture. It is traumatic retention is what Resba Menakem says. It's traumatic retention that has lost its context over time. So retention is about holding on to something. It's about gripping it. So it's traumatic retention. It's something that we hold on to. And so it no longer has context because it happened so long ago. That's like slavery in America. People say that was so long ago. So, but what we do, it's this traumatic retention. We hold on to it because we know, many of us know, of course, it's a fact that it's part of American history. And so we hold on to it, but now it doesn't have any context because black people are not in chains anymore. Now it doesn't have context because we've got a black president. Now it doesn't have context because black people have their own schools. I mean, why are they complaining? But there's this retention. It holds on because just because it no longer has context, it hasn't lost its power. So it's traumatic retention, and they can have profound effects on what we do, on what we think, on what we feel, on what we believe, on what we experience, and really what we find meaningful. So again, it's what happens in our bodies. And you all are saying a lot of things. Let me see what you're saying. Because on the conference call line, I want you to know not just what I'm saying, but I want you to feel free to say anything you want. And I want to make sure that I respect what people are saying here. I see you, Miss Williams. Yes, discipline by parents may cause trauma. There you go. And I won't even get into that. I've been reading some things, Miss Williams, about how European bodies were accustomed to abusing one another. So then whenever people of African descent were put in chains, those Europeans then, because they were used to abusing bodies, they abused black bodies. So then black bodies learned that behavior from those European white bodies. And so what happened is that black bodies started saying things like, you know, when I was a child, my daddy, my mama beat me. Well, that's something that was learned from European bodies abusing one another. And then that was passed down to black bodies. So now what's happened is you hear a lot of European bodies, you know, white Americans talking about not beating their children, where now black bodies are saying, well, I don't know what they're talking about. You know, I got beat. You know, I got beat. So now white bodies have abandoned a lot of that. But black bodies, again, trauma retention, are gripping that type of traumatic behavior. I can tell you that when I was a child, you know, my dad was something else. You know, I did. I'm just like you. I got those beatings, spankings, whatever you want to call them. And I can tell you that I was once in a relationship. And because my dad gave us spankings, beatings, whatever you want to call it, when the man raised his hand, I flinched. Trauma retention. I'm giving you some real information here about my lived experience. It's not book now. I'm giving us more examples. So yes, Miss Williams, because of that type of beating, if you will, as you say, discipline by parents. Now I'm talking about a physical beating. There I was in a relationship thinking, oh, this man is about to hit me. See that? So I had to have a conversation with that man to let him know it's not you, it's me. So when people say that, sometimes that's really true. It's not you, it's me. So thank you for saying that. Miss Hall, the saying is what happens in the house stays in the house. There you go. That's why so many people are so hurt. And that's why suicide is one of the many causes. Yeah, there you go. Trauma is bad. You're right. And Secret Place Studio, helping each other to heal. Amen. Yes, you're welcome, Mr. Cobb. You're saying it makes sense. Yes, and Mr. Daniel, yes, you're 100% right. Okay, so you all know these things. It's just sometimes we don't vocalize it because it's embarrassing. Like if I say that my dad disciplined me by giving me beatings or spankings or whatever you all call it or want to call it, then it's like, oh my gosh, Dr. McCoy's dad was a devil. Well, like Miss Hall said, some things were supposed to stay in the house. I'm not supposed to tell you that. But if I'm going to help you understand trauma retention, I had to give you that story from when I was a child so that I can give you the other story of being a grown woman in a relationship with a man and thinking, oh, he's about to hit me. See that? You have your work to do too. But first you have to uncover it. Now, you don't have to be like me and tell everybody. But I don't care what it looks like. You can think whatever you want about me or my dad. Or I am about healing. And the reason why I can talk about this is because healing has taken place in my life. Now, I'm still on a journey, but I can talk about it now because, like Miss Hall said, I am not saying what stays in the house because my body is a house. And if I keep that stuff staying in this house, I'm not going to be effective in my teachings and my preachings. If I keep that in this house, this body right here, I'm not going to be able to help other people, heal other hearts. If I keep it in this house, then whenever I am, to get married, I'm not going to be any good to that man because I haven't done my own work. So he can help me unpack some bags and I can help him unpack some bags, but it's my responsibility to be a whole person. People say you come into a relationship and they complete you and no. You need to go ahead and be complete. Don't put that pressure on them. You need to go ahead and do your work. Don't put that. No. It's not people's business to raise you. Your parents already raised you or your whoever. And wherever they fail, it's time for you to be a grown-up. And it's time for you to do your own work. Okay? That's what this is about. So with that said, most people experience, somebody might be like, well, Dr. McCoy, you talk about trauma retention and unhealed trauma, and you helped me to ground my body before you gave me all this. See, that's why I'm helping you to do that, right? But what about the experience of trauma? You're talking about all these traumas, but what about the experience of trauma? Well, with all the things that I've said, most people experience trauma if they have experienced. So if you've experienced, I see you, Sister Vaughn. Yes, we are all on a journey. If you've experienced something unexpected, like recently there was a bridge that just collapsed was it Maryland? Yes, in Maryland. Okay, so you experienced trauma if it was something unexpected like that, and you may say, well, I wasn't on that bridge. Yeah, but indirect trauma is real too, okay? Or collective trauma. Yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit. But okay, so, because again, some people say, unhealed trauma, I'm not talking about that. I don't have any trauma. Okay, if you experience something unexpected, yes, you do have trauma. It involves a death of many people, especially children. We can think about school shootings, trauma. Okay. If it lasts a long time or repeats itself, multiple times, like hurricanes, like Hurricane Katrina, something like that. There are people still gripping that because they haven't done what I'm trying to help us do right now. Okay. If your trauma has unknown causes, like for instance, your partner just mysteriously disappears or your child disappears. You know how they have those people on the milk carton or something like that. If your trauma is something deeply meaningful, going back to bombings or school shootings or something like that, deeply meaningful, like the airplanes flying into the Twin Towers. Doesn't matter how long ago it was. See that? So you've experienced trauma then. Or if it's something that impacts a large area like the Twin Towers or like the airplanes that have gone down just in 2025 and we're just in February. So that's trauma for you, okay? Didn't have to be your child. You have a heart and you care about people. That's traumatic to you. It didn't have to be your family member. Or what about impacts many people? A trauma like COVID-19, like COVID-19. That's something, okay? And that's a collective trauma. So these are the effects of trauma involving specific incidences, for example. But what about, he brings up the effects of repetitive trauma, unhealed traumas that accumulate over time. What about those type of traumas? So the research is in now. He says that the effects on the body from trauma that is persistent is significantly negative. Trauma that is persistent. So that could be something like someone who is talking down to you on a regular basis. This is why, it's important. And I'm not talking about just a romantic relationship. It could be somebody in your family. And I know family is important. I get it. But let me tell you something. If you have somebody in your family where every time you come around, they're saying something negative about maybe your weight, or they're saying something negative about, well, you hadn't had a child yet, or they're saying something negative about your parenting, or you come into your family space and every year, well, when are you going to get married? Did I say that one? No, I said about the child. Or I need you to think about what that's doing to your body, okay? I know if you got tough skin, I know we do that, roll off your back like a duck. All these little sayings that people say. I see you, Miss Michelle Williams. We had a plane crash in Philadelphia, killing a child and others leaving a hospital. There you go. So there are all different types. There's different types of trauma. So even in your family, so you just need to think about what that's doing. Repetitive trauma is doing to your body. Every holiday season, you make yourself go to the family function, knowing that that's not good for your mental health. I'm just giving you some. If you want to heal, you have to think about what happens to your body when you enter that space, okay? But there's all types of traumas. Thank you, Miss Michelle Williams, for mentioning that plane crash in particular, because there are so many traumas. Every trauma is not personal. Sometimes they're historical. Now that is a historical trauma for America. That goes down in the history book of America. So there are historical traumas. There are intergenerational traumas. You know, when people talk about curses, family, generational curses and all that kind of stuff. Well, you can just simply call that trauma too, okay? We don't have to over-spiritualize everything. Sometimes that's intergenerational trauma. Great-granddaddy did it, so then granddaddy did it, and now daddy does it, and then son does it, and then grandson does it. Traumatizing the family. That's intergenerational trauma. Institutionalized trauma is what I mentioned with the white body supremacy. And it could be gender discrimination. It could be sexual orientation discrimination. These are the type of traumas that people are walking around with. And we need to be more sensitive to that. You don't have to agree with everybody's lifestyle or everybody's choice. But you don't have to be the reason why they are traumatized either. Let me say that again. You don't have to agree with everybody's choice and the way that everybody lives their life. And you also don't have to be the reason why they are traumatized. So it's just not about your trauma, but it's about the trauma that you inflict on other people. So those types of things often interact, all those different types of trauma. So as these traumas compound, you know, each other. I may have a personal trauma. Then there's the plane crash trauma. That's historical. And then, you know, there's an institutionalized trauma because I'm in a black body living in America and white body supremacy is really, really, you know, really real. So all these things that impact, you know, and then there's a new or recent trauma that just happened, something happening to my body. I just found out something, some type of a sickness, and any of these traumas can happen, but then there could be triggers. I'm triggered at the same time, and you know, the energy of older experiences start to seem that they take over my body and they can create this ever increasing damage on my human life. You know, remember when I said everything is not spiritual? Something then happens to my body, and that's why I don't want to get out of the bed in the morning. It's a struggle. So then, I'm a preacher, so I got to put this in. Now I'm going to close the book. So then I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. But I'm a person of faith. So then I do get out of the bed and I go to my faith community. I go to church. And I go to church because I love God. But it was hard for me to get there because of all the things that I just shared with you. All of these traumas that I know that are there and I'm not even dealing with it. But I'm going to go to church. Pastor, church leader, I have a question for you. What do faith spaces do to support people who are healing from trauma? And I would be bold to say that might be just about everybody in the congregation. Okay, no, Dr. McCoy, that's just, you're really, what they say, you're stretching that. You know, you're really, that's not everybody in the congregation. Well, Pastor, everybody in the congregation that's still alive, they made it through COVID-19. So everybody in your pew is dealing with a collective trauma called COVID-19. Oh yeah, they made it through. They praised their way. Thank the Lord. Hallelujah. And then, because they're still healing for whatever reason, because everybody, all of us who are still alive, thanks be to God, there's a trauma attached to COVID-19. What is the faith community doing about it? Well, I'll be happy to report that I was on Facebook and I saw a church that I had the great opportunity to preach in Virginia called Moore Street. I think that's the one. Yeah. And I tell you, they're having, and I meant to write it down, but they're having a gathering, and it is to consider all the people we lost in America during COVID-19. I'm not saying that there's never been a church to do it, but I'm just happy that I saw that one. So then, Pastor, be encouraged now. Your people in the pews, they're traumatized, but be encouraged because you are too. And it's okay to name that. Are there going to be services, or what are we going to do? We have a book of Lamentations. We got a Bible. Book of Lamentations. We can use that. We have people in the Bible who cried out to God because of their losses, because of their grief, because of their pain, because of their suffering. We can use that. So I want to encourage you that if you are a faith leader, get on it, okay? Because the traumas are compounding. And they can praise their way through it. It's great. They can read their Bibles. They can pray. And then they look to you for healing in God's house. We can't just say God is a healer and then not give people an opportunity to heal in God's house. So if you're a pastor, get busy. I know you're hurting. I know it's a lot. I get it, but you signed up for it. Okay? I see you posting. I see it's hard. I get all that. It's hard for everybody. It's hard for that woman who is a single parent. It's hard for that man who is trying to, make ends meet. It's hard for that child who has so many things to juggle. And the fact of the matter is that many of our children don't have elders like you had. We don't have elders. We have people judging us. They're not helping us. They're judging us. So this is a generation without elders. So I want you to think about that. There's a few sprinkled throughout. But that good big mama and all that is not necessarily what everybody is experiencing. So again, when they come to church, what are we giving them? When you put that sermon together, what are you teaching them? It's time for everybody to consider their trauma. You're not the only one hurting. People around you are too. So start with yourself, get it together, and let's do this work, okay? I see you, Miss Rita. We all have some type of trauma. There you go. And we take it around with us. Trauma retention, gripping it. Brother Dwight, thanks for the great teaching and conversation. Well said. I loved every minute. Oh, God bless you. You be blessed too. Thank you all so very much. You're welcome, Sister Samantha. And God bless you, Brother Cobb and Sister Williams. Yes, COVID traumatized me when I lost some family members to something that I could not see. That was a scary time for me. Yes, so please know that I'm praying for us as we continue to maneuver through all of the pain and the hurt and the things that we deal with in our bodies, okay? So be well, take care of yourself, and it'll be week number 3 next week, okay? All right, I see you, Miss Wilson. Thank you so much. Make it make sense. Oh, you okay. God bless you. You're welcome. You're welcome, all of you. And thank you for being here. And to just know I'm keeping you in prayer. And as you pray, I'm pushing you to do something. Okay? Do something for the sake of yourself and for the sake of people around you. All right? Have a great night. See you next week. Or won't really see you, but next week. All right.